We ready to roll? Hey, good morning and happy Sabbath. Feliz Sabado, Shabbat Shalom. That's all I've got for languages. It's good to see all of you here this morning. Let's go ahead and bow our heads as we say a blessing over our Torah study this morning. Blessed are you, Yehovah our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with commandments and commands us to engage in the words of Torah. So it's good to be here this Sabbath, even though it's a little bit cold. This morning's Torah portion is portion Vayeshev, and he dwelt. It starts in Genesis chapter 37. And can I get a volunteer to read the first section? It's Genesis 37, verses 1 through 11. Mike? Can we get a mic for Mike?
Genesis 37:1, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, the dream which I have dreamed. For behold, ye were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Shall you indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And yet he dreamed another dream, and he told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his fathers and his brethren. And his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone have any comments on that section? One thing that stood out to me, and kind of in this whole section with the story of Joseph, is how Joseph is portrayed as a savior figure, a shadow of Yeshua to come. And this is kind of the beginning of that in the section that we just read, how he's lesser, but it's showing that he's going to be king and ruler over all of them, and going to be the head.
Because I'm a mental health therapist, I think of these types of things. There were 3 different accounts of how they hated him, and it was a beginning of hatred without just cause. I mean, there wasn't anything really devastating to them personally. So you think of the spirit of hatred that kind of rests in their heart, and then it becomes more and more advanced as other events come up that they dislike. So to me, it just really paints a picture of that spiritual warfare that's going on all the time. And when you open up that door for without just cause, it will expand it and grow and feed itself.
I think expounding on that a little bit, and I didn't write this down in my notes, and I wish I would have, so I don't have the actual Hebrew word here in front of me. But when it says that Joseph was 17 years old and he went out and shepherded with his brothers, the way that that's written, it can be taken that he either shepherded the flock with his brothers or he shepherded his brothers with the flock. And so there may have been a little bit of, what do you want to call it, goody two-shoes behavior from Joseph even at the beginning. So.
So one thing as we went through Genesis as a family, we'd kind of looked at the story of Joseph and realized that from what we can observe, there was some of what you were talking about, that because he was favored, there would have been a lot of jealousy from his brothers, and that his basically he could do no wrong in the eyes of his father. So there would have been a lot of things going on there. And Joseph probably most likely would have been kind of a spoiled child. And that's probably some of the reason why he had to go through so many things in Egypt, was for the refining. Because a lot of times in our lives when we when we think we're better than other people, when we have a complex like I can do no wrong, Yahweh has to really work on us. You know what I mean? To get us in a place where we can be used by Him, and we can kind of see. He's talking here about, he's telling him this dream, and it could have been even in the look, you're going to bow to me. You know what I mean? And his brothers are getting really upset, and so in the whole story, both become humbled, the brothers and him. So that's just some observances we had.
Yeah, thank you. I think Jehovah has a way of humbling all of us, for sure. All right. Yeah, Mike?
So does anybody know what the evil report that Joseph brought to his father from the sons of Bilhah and, was it Bilhah and Zilpah?
I know I don't know.
In the Chumash, it doesn't say exactly. They're not sure. But they do point out this was one of the reasons his brothers hated him, because he was, possibly a tattletale. And so that's just an insight from the Chumash.
Jason?
I thought it was an interesting parallel when it talks about having given those the dreams, and then even after he was rebuked by his father, that it said his father still kept thinking about them or pondering them in his heart, which is a kind of a parallel to when the shepherds came to Mary, and in Luke 2:19, and they told her of all the wonderful things which were told to them by the shepherds, but Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. That parallel is pretty interesting, as you were talking about that Savior figure being Joseph, and just a note.
Thematic connections. There we go. All right. Can we get a volunteer to read the next section? It's still in Genesis 37, verses 12 through 22.
I can read it.
Thank you.
Now his brothers went to pasture their flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father."
Does anyone have any comments on that section? I know one thing. Oh, go ahead, Stevie.
I was just thinking, I was just thinking that this beautiful coat that Joseph had, that he really stood out even from a distance. They knew who was coming.
One of the things that stood out to me as I was reading this, when he answered his father, when his father said, "Will you go see your brothers?" He said, "Here I am," and that's the same Hebrew word Hanani that Abraham used when God called him to go out and sacrifice Isaac, and he's basically saying, "I'm here, not my will, not what I want to do, but what you want me to do." And I thought that was interesting. Anyone else? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting with his brothers. They were talking about killing him because of his dreams. It's almost like they could stop what the dreams foretold from happening. And I think it's maybe because at that time they were used to manipulating their gods, but Jehovah stood up and said, "It doesn't matter what you do, my will is going to be done." And his brothers got to see that at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jehovah has a way of working out his will in his time and his ways, regardless of what we as people do, for sure. All right, can I get a volunteer to read the next section? It's chapter 37, verses 23 through 36, the rest of the chapter there. All right, Stevie?
So it was that when Joseph arrived to be with his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the long-sleeved robe he was wearing, and took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty without any water in it. Then they sat down to eat their meal. But as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Ishmaelim coming from Gilad, their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium, on the way down to Egypt. Yehuda said to his brothers, "What advantage is it to us if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers paid attention to him. So when the Midianim merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 1/2 pound of silver shekels to the Ishmaelim, who took Joseph on to Egypt. Reuben returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Joseph wasn't in it, tore his clothes in mourning. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I go now?" They took Joseph's robe, killed a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. Then they sent the long-sleeved robe and brought it to their father, saying, "We found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not?" He recognized it and cried, "It's my son's robe. Some wild animal has torn Joseph in pieces and eaten him." Yaakov tore his clothes and, putting sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused all consolation, saying, "No, I will go down to the grave to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midianim sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, a captain of the guard.
All right, thank you. So, why was Reuben so worried about what happened to Joseph? Right, Nick?
I don't know, maybe my thought is that he actually had a little bit of an ulterior motive when he said, don't kill him. That he actually knew that, well, his conscience was telling him not to let this happen, and he would have known how, even though he didn't like his brother, how much it would affect his father. And I think there's some of that going on, and he may have thought that they already had killed him when he tore his clothes. So my thought is that, Reuben, even though he wasn't portrayed as the most righteous person, maybe, even that God-given conscience was pricking at him a little bit.
Reuben was also the firstborn, so he kind of was responsible for everybody too. So anything bad that happened to any of his brothers kind of fell on his head. Even though he kind of had disqualified himself from the birthright because of his deal with Bilhah a few chapters back, he was still, I'm sure all of the bad things would have stopped with him as far as firstborn responsibilities, even though he was out of line for getting the good stuff. Yeah, Lori?
Two pieces to this, that going back to when they presented the coat to their father, do you recognize this? They knew that his father would recognize the coat. They all recognized the coat. It was a unique coat. But then they stood back and allowed their father, to come to a conclusion. His mind cannot go to a place where, you dastardly sons, what have you done? But he spoke this out loud, that this must have been what happened, and they all were in agreement with that silently. And that is the story, that is the narrative that went out until the end. But going back to the cistern, when I was in Israel, we were in Joshua's cistern, and it's a very, very large cistern, and we probably talked about this before, but without water being in there, one of the things that I can't remember the lady's name, but she had described, without water, you're going to have scorpions and you're going to have serpents down in there. And so he's left in this dark cistern with these creatures of the night running around, harassing him, and spirits also harassing him in that cistern.
Not a good place to be. Jason?
This is more of a question. Does anybody know why it lists both Ishmaelites and Midianites as who he was sold to? Because they say they're going to sell him to the Ishmaelites, but then it says that they sold him to the Midianites, and the Midianites then sold him down into Egypt. But Midian came from Keturah, Abraham and Keturah, whereas Ishmaelites came from Abraham and Hagar, right? So it's a different line. Anybody know that?
Stevie?
Was he sold twice?
I don't really know. But I read where Rashi's grandson said that there was, they didn't make immediate plans. They had the idea of killing. And then they changed their mind and said, no, let's put him in the pit. Then they changed their mind, no, let's sell him. So each time that they changed their plan, it showed they weren't really united in this idea of just killing their brother, right? And so it got to the point then say, okay, we'll sell him. They saw the Ishmaelites, right? But then it says they went and they ate. Where did they go? And where was Reuben? So, because it doesn't actually say where Reuben is. If as you read there, you think he's with them, and then next thing you know, it's like he wasn't there. It seems kind of strange the way it's worded. But The Midian helps us to understand that the situation here is very fluid, all right? And so they're not firm, and they're not firmly united in what they want to do about Joseph. So it's already gotten from murdering their own brother now to the point where they were going to sell him. And then what happens? We have these Midian. Where'd they come from? Okay, so they're on this trade route. So the idea there that Rashi's grandson thought that it was they had gone off to eat, that wherever they had the meal prepared, they'd gone off. Because, part of the reason he said, because they didn't want to listen to him crying and screaming from this pit. It just put them off their food altogether, right? So they were not there. They were out of earshot at least. Mm-hmm. So the Midians came by and heard him, and they sold him to the Ishmaelite caravan that was coming. So that's how he reasoned through that, just that one word because of that within. But it also brought to mind all the different changes that were happening here. So we can say, well, we see God's hand in all of this
Right.
as well. So,
Yep. And as I was studying, I read some speculation, and I think that's all any of us have is speculation on who all was being the slave traders and whatnot. But what I was reading was saying that the Ishmaelites were such a trading people that caravans of slave traders and traders of other goods became commonly known as Ishmaelite traders, whether they were actually Ishmaelites or not, or possibly because it was such a heavy trade route, it could have been multiple caravans. He could have been sold from caravan to caravan on the way down to Egypt, because one caravan may not have gone the whole way. So who would we say was the ringleader for getting rid of Joseph? Yeah, Donnie? Judah?
I think it was Shimon. I think he's the one that said, let's kill him.
So why would Judah have been the ringleader if it was Judah?
Judah didn't want to kill Joseph, but he just wanted him out of the picture in his own.
So why would he have wanted him out of the picture, though? So,
Because which reason do you want?
what I was studying, and I kind of brought this up a little bit before, Reuben had kind of already forfeited his birthright because of his actions with Bilhah. And so he was the firstborn, but he was going to no longer get the firstborn rights. So that put Simeon and Levi as second and third, next in line for the firstborn, for the birthright. But they kind of forfeited it because of their actions in Shechem. And so who does that put as next in line? That puts Judah as next in line for the firstborn's birthright. But Joseph was also the firstborn of Rachel, and so there may have been a lot of contention going on there to who's going to really get that birthright. So I think Judah had a lot at stake in his mind. Yeah. Stevie?
The reason I say Shimon is because he's the hothead, and he's bloodthirsty, and he already has proven himself to be a murderer. And so he would be ringleader. I don't know if that's the right word or whatever the leader might be, but he's the one that gets the ball rolling. Because who is it that Joseph selects to stay behind and be imprisoned when he sends all the other brothers back and said, don't come back without Benjamin, without the youngest, right? It's Shimon. So he wanted to, at the very least, not have Shimon anywhere near his younger brother.
Excellent point.
So,
Yep.
but there's a lot to that, and certainly Yehuda, if he was even thinking of that, which he probably was, he didn't, everyone knew that Joseph was their father's favorite, so there was no hope for any of the rest of them as long as Joseph was alive, or in the, as you say, in the picture.
Yeah. Donnie?
That's a really good point, Stevie. And if you also go back, this is on a slightly different topic about Reuben. The rabbis make a very interesting comment. They say that if Reuben knew that the Torah would have been written about him and how he had delayed, the situation, he would have actually carried Joseph on his shoulders and ran away with him back to Jacob.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Mike?
So just a couple things here. Yeah, it doesn't say who led the conspiracy. It's likely that it could have been the sons of I'm having trouble reading my own writing. Bilkah and Zilpah, because he brought evil report against them to his father. But we know that biblical history is future prophecy. And the idea that possibly Judah was involved, we know that when Yeshua came unto his own, and his own received him not, we know the whole story of Joseph portrays, what would happen when Messiah came. But it was, who condemned Yeshua to death, but yet it wasn't their hands that actually shed his blood. Remember he said here, Judah, let it, what shall we profit? If we slay him, okay? So Judah, when Yeshua was here, was, I believe, a big part of getting Yeshua crucified, but their hands didn't actually do it. But yet then again, it was Judah who, when Benjamin was going to be held by Joseph, and who was it that stood up and said, for Benjamin? Who was it? It was Judah. So here we see Judah in acting in two different ways. Let's not kill him, okay, but he was probably a big part of the conspiracy, right? But yet in the end, he was the one that stood up to give his life. So we see that, Yeshua, or Judah was conspired to kill Yeshua, the Jews, but yet the one who came from the tribe of Judah, Yeshua, was the one that stood up to save his people. So Amen. Just a couple connections here about Joseph and his, that whole family and everything going on to future prophecy.
I think there's a lot of connections. Joseph being sold for the slave price, just like Yeshua was sold for the slave price. Although I think that comes into modern day with all the inflation there, 20 pieces versus 30. Right, do we have a volunteer to read the next section? It is the entirety of chapter 38.
And whoever decides, also on the 20 shekels, it mentions in the commentary that 20 shekels was the price of redemption, and also that when it was divided up between that division of what 2 shekels per person was, also this is what the commentary says, was equal to the what was had to be paid for the temple tribute, by each individual. So just another thought.
Robin?
It also says a slave under 20, a male slave under 20 was the fair price. 20. Mine
Stevie?
The money probably went to the Midian merchants. They were the ones that sold him. It wasn't the brothers that ended up selling him. That was Judah's idea, but they were away eating when the Midianites came upon him. They pulled him out. They sold him. They got the money, and they left. So that's another possible scenario. So it just shows the progression of things that happened. Otherwise, why are the Midians mentioned? They're mentioned, and then it says they pulled them out and sold them.
Any volunteers to read chapter 38? All right, over here.
Genesis chapter 38. And it came about at the time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite, whose name was Herah. Judah saw there a daughter of certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he took her as a wife and had relations with her. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She gave birth to yet another son and named him Shelah. And it was at Shezib that she gave birth to him. Now Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Onan, have relations with your brother's wife and perform your duty as a brother-in-law to her and raise up a child for your brother. Now Onan knew that the child would not be his. So when he had relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground so that he would not give a child to his brother. But what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, so he took his life also. When Judah said to his wife-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought, I am afraid that he too may die like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in his father's house. Now after a considerable time, Shu's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went up to his sheepshers at Timnah, and he and his friends, Hera and Adulamit. And Tamar was told, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Tamar to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow garment and covered herself with a veil and wrapped herself and sat in the gateway of Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw the Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he assumed she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, Hear not, let me have relations with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me that you may have relations with me? He said, Therefore I will send you a young goat from the flock. She then said, Will you give me a pledge until you send it? He said, What pledge shall I give you? And she said, Your seal and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her and had relations with her, and she conceived by him. Then she got up and departed and removed her veil and put on her widow's garment. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the people of her place, saying, What is the temple prostitute who was by the road at Enem? But they said, There has been no temple prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I did not find her. And furthermore, the people of the place said, There has been no temple prostitute here. Then Judah said, Let her keep them, otherwise we will become a laughing stock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her. Now it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, Your daughter-in-law Tamar was prostituted herself, and behold, she is also pregnant by prostitution. Then Judah said, Bring her out and have her burned. It was a while she was being brought out, and she sent words to her father-in-law, saying, I am pregnant by a man to whom these things she also said, Please examine and see whose signet ring and cord and staff are these. And Judah recognized them and said, She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not have relations with her again. It came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there was twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth that one baby put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, This one came out first. But it came out as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. Then she said, What a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Perez. Afterwards his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Sarah.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments on this section? Yes.
I feel like I ask this every year. Why is this inserted, does anybody know, in the middle of this story? Like, you're here reading about Joseph, push the pause button, and we hear this, and then, okay, resume, then we continue about Joseph. I ask this all the time, and I can't remember the answer.
I don't know that I have a real answer, but I have a theory, and then Donnie, you can go ahead and answer. I think because Joseph is such a picture of the Savior and such a foreshadowing of that, I think that this is put in here to remind us whose line the promise goes through. So the promise of the Savior goes through the line of Judah, and in this section, in this chapter, it talks of how Judah had gone and he had married a Canaanite woman, and God did not want his line to come through the Canaanites. And the rabbis say that Tamar was a Semite from the line of Shem, and so this kind of shows how God brings back and keeps the line of Judah in his people the way that he wants, works out his plans in his ways.
It just seems weird it's inserted right there in the middle.
Right.
Yeah, but
It's inserted for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's to compare Judah to Joseph and how they responded, because both stories are almost parallel. Joseph and Judah, both of their stories almost parallel each other. So how it contrasts Joseph with Judah. Also, regarding the Canaanite wife, the word for Canaanite can also mean merchant. So we're not 100% sure if Judah's first wife was a Canaanite or the daughter of a merchant. But that would kind of make sense if she's the daughter of a merchant, because at that time, first of all, it says Judah descends. In the Hebrew, it says he descends, meaning in the aftermath of what happened with Joseph, Judah, he was kind of the unspoken leader of the group. Everyone kind of did what Judah told them to do. And Judah kind of was like, hey, let's do this. And all the other brothers would follow and listen. They're like, why did you make us sell our brother? So for that reason, they demoted him. They kicked him out of their group. And so he goes and he starts doing business deals and making living for himself. And so that's how he gets into this situation. So the first reason why these two passages are side by side is to contrast the two people. I also like the point you made about remind us of the line that Messiah comes through. I like that point. Another point that the rabbis make up is keep in mind that both stories are parallel. So if both stories are parallel, the female figures in both stories are parallel also. And so they say that actually Potiphar's wife is not what we think it is. She actually acted for nobler reasons. Doesn't mean that her actions were righteous. Sometimes good intentions are behind bad deeds, but bad deeds are still bad deeds. And so that's a story for another time. So both women were trying to carry on a godly line is really what was going on. So that's a couple ideas.
And I want to add to what you're saying. This is a really messy family. And it just shows our humanness that we cannot ascend to the thoughts of Yahweh and what his plans are, because we are too busy cleaning up our messy lives and our messy family systems. And so what this speaks to me is the redemption that Yahweh has for anybody, no matter what your history is, no matter what the messiness is, no matter what the trauma is. Everything is redeemable if you surrender your heart and have obedience to the will of the Father, because we don't understand we think we know in our own, intelligence, this is the path I ought to take. But without his guidance, we create other messiness in our family systems.
And God takes our mess and he works his plans out anyway.
Yes.
Sorry, one more thing. I had to share this. This really touched me this week. So when you look at the birth of the two sons, which is very interesting, the rabbis have a very interesting theory on this, that really this is the lineage of Messiah, but also it's an allegory for us as a people, what each of us individually goes through. The two boys, their names are Zerach and Perez. And there's a theory, it's based off of either Psalm 24, I think it's Psalm 24, it's based off of, that the rabbis have. They say that before we are born, when we're sitting in the womb, we are literally being taught Torah. And really, if you think about it, we are naturally, Torah is a part of who we are. When we learn Torah like today, we're just relearning it because we already learned it. But what happens is you are given the 9 months to study Torah, but then when you are leaving the womb in the spiritual realm, the hand comes forth, just like in this story, and strikes your lips, and it causes you to forget all the Torah you know as you come into this world. So you Why is Perez? He breaks through first. Because you have to break through the wall of forgetfulness by studying Torah, wrestling with Torah, being like Jacob who wrestles with God. I am wrestling through the wall of forgetfulness. I am wrestling through this wall of my evil inclination that wants to go against God because I naturally am trying to remember everything, but I can't exactly remember. I'm like the person who has amnesia, right? Who got the head injury, but I'm trying to remember, like Jason Bourne, but I'm trying to remember. And it comes slowly back. But the more you break through that wall, what's waiting on the other side is the other son named Zerach. And that Zerach literally means shining. So you return to the shining. Just a little analogy there that the rabbis talk about in this portion. I thought was really cool.
Very cool. All right, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to read chapter 39. It's the next two portions in chapter 39, but it's pretty short here, so I'll go ahead and read those. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelim who had brought him there. Yehovah was with Joseph, and he became wealthy while he was in the household of his master the Egyptian. His master saw how Yehovah was with him, and that Yehovah prospered everything that he did. Joseph pleased him as he served him, and his master appointed him manager of his household, and he entrusted all his possessions to Joseph. From the time he appointed him manager of the household and all his possessions, Yehovah blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. Yehovah's blessing was on all he owned, whether in the house or in the field, so he left all his possessions in Joseph's care, and because he had him, he paid no attention to his affairs, except for the food that he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome as well. In time the day came when his master's wife took a look at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, because my master has me, he doesn't know what's going on in this house. He has put all his possessions in my charge. In this house I am his equal. He hasn't withheld anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" But she kept pressing him day after day. Nevertheless, he didn't listen to her. He refused to sleep with her or even be with her. However, one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men living in the house were there indoors, she grabbed him by his robe and said, "Sleep with me." But he fled, leaving his robe in her hand, and got himself outside. When she saw that he had left his robe in her hand and had escaped, she called all the men of her house and said to them, "Look at this, my husband brought in a Hebrew to make fools of us. He came in and wanted to sleep with me, but I yelled out loudly. When he heard me yelling like that, he left his robe with me and ran out." She put the robe aside until his master came home, and then she said to him, "This Hebrew slave you brought us came in to make a fool of me. But when I yelled out, he left his robe with me and fled outside." When his master heard what his wife said as she showed him, "Here's what your slave did to me," he became furious. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, in the place where the king's prisoners were kept. But there he was in the prison. But Yehovah was with Joseph, showing him grace and giving him favor in the sight of the prison warden. The prison warden made Joseph supervisor of all the prisoners in the prison, so that whatever they did there, he was in charge of it. The prison warden paid no attention to anything Joseph did, because Yehovah was with him, and whatever he did, Yehovah prospered. The thing that really stood out to me in that chapter was it begins and it ends with, "And Yehovah was with Joseph." And I thought that was really, really good. Anybody else have any comments on that chapter? I think we're about done. Are we out of time? 3 minutes?
I'll be quick. I want to know what Donnie thinks was noble about what she did, even though it was with bad motives.
So do I.
So, Midrash and Book of Jasher says that when her husband brought Joseph into the household, which was the common practice of Egyptians, she consulted the magicians, the diviners, and the soothsayers, and was like, what is the future of this person we're bringing into the household? And they're like, you will have descendants from this person. And so she, in her mindset, did not know it's her daughter who's going to marry Joseph. So that's why that's a little messy right there.
Okay.
So, but hurrying up, I just thought, I'm not going to go into detail about this. Verse 8, when it says he refused, there's a cannellation mark over that. Cannellation mark, just for a fun fact, the Torah is written in Hebrew, but the Hebrew in the Torah has musical notes on it. So Torah is basically a song. If you know the musical notes, you can literally chant out or sing Torah. And the musical note that sits on top of, and he refused, verse 8, Vaimain, that cannellation mark is a difficult cannellation mark to sing, and it represents intense emotional struggle, but also a strong resolve to conquer. Just a thought there.
Excellent. All right, we are out of time, so let's go ahead and bow our heads and end with a blessing. Blessed are you, Yehovah our God, King of the universe, who has given us the Torah of truth and placed eternal life within us. Blessed are you, Yehovah, giver of the Torah. Thank you all.